Since the conception of basketball in 1891, when it was just played with a peach basket and a ball that looked more like a soccer ball than the ones we know today, its players have only gotten better at scoring. Because of the ever-increasing skill, or because of the ever-decreasing effort on defense, the average points scored by teams throughout the league has increased quite dramatically in recent years. And today, we're going to be talking about the 5 most impressive scoring outings, but surprisingly, most of them didn't happen very recently. From triple overtime marathons in the 80s to modern day shootouts where teams practically live behind the arc, these games showcase basketball at its very best, where players just can't seem to miss any shots. Our very first game is the Golden State Warriors versus the Denver Nuggets on November 2nd, 1990. Though this is the lowest scoring game we're going to talk about today, it's probably the most impressive, as the game didn't even need to go into overtime to reach its status in the top 5, unlike every other game we're going to be talking about. Before the jump, this game was destined to be high scoring. Though it was the season opener, looking back at the team's stats shows the final score really wasn't all that surprising. The Nuggets ranked number 1 in points per game, scoring 119.9 points. Defensively, however, they ranked last in points allowed per game. On average, they allowed a whopping 130.8 points per game, meaning they typically lost by about 11 points. Now, if we look at the Warriors, they ranked second in points per game, scoring 116.6 points, and their defense ranked only a tiny bit better at second to last rather than last, but they still allowed 115 points per game. This means that the difference between the worst defense, the Nuggets, and the second worst defense, the Warriors, was 15 points, which really shows how reliant the Nuggets had to be on their offense that season. Score at the end of the first quarter was Golden State 43, Denver 41, totaling 84 points. At the end of half, the score was 87 to 83, with Golden State still leading, totaling 170 points. The scoring, of course, didn't slow down much in the second half, and the game ended 162 to 158, which gives us a total score of 320 points. Though Denver never really got a lead throughout the entirety of the game, it's still insanely impressive that they allowed 162 points to be scored on them, and they still only lost by 4. Now, you may expect that one player just went absolutely off for either team, but that's really not the case, as you'll see with most of the games I'm going to be talking about today. But both teams just had like a couple of guys that played really well, rather than one dude who scored a bunch. For the Nuggets, those guys were Orlando Woolridge and Walter Davis, scoring 37 and 33 points respectively. The Nuggets also had 5 other guys who put up double digits. For Golden State, they had Chris Mullin, Tim Hardaway, and Mitch Richmond, who acted as their sort of big 3 that season. Respectively, they put up 38, 32, and 29 points, and they had 2 other guys that put up double digits. One of the craziest aspects of this game was the shooting percentages, absolutely off the charts. The Warriors shot an outlandish 57.7% from field and 50% from 3. Leading this was Chris Mullin, who shot 64% on 25 shots. The Nuggets, on the other hand, only shot 43.8% from the field and 30.7% from 3. Walter Davis still led them with an impressive 58.2% on 24 shots, though. Being that the final score was 320 points, and knowing that this is the only game we're going to have today that ended in regulation, it unsurprisingly lands itself as the lowest scoring of the ones we're going to be talking about, number 5. Jumping to the future, we have the Chicago Bulls and Atlanta Hawks playing on March 1st, 2019. Besides this being one of the highest scoring games, it also happens to be one of the longest games in NBA history. This game lasted for 4 overtimes, making its total runtime 68 minutes. The game started out fairly normally, with Atlanta going up 33 to 26 at the end of the first, and they maintained their lead going into half, 60 to 57. At the end of the third quarter, Chicago took an 11-point lead, but a 40-point fourth quarter from the Hawks led to the game being forced in overtime, tied at 124. Neither team could pull ahead in the first overtime, the second overtime, or the third overtime. But eventually the Bulls were able to take a 7-point lead in the fourth and finish the game. The game saw slightly more impressive scoring feats than the previous one, with Zach LaVine putting up 47 points and Trae Young putting up 49. Some other notable scorers for the game were the Bulls' Otto Porter Jr. and Lauri Markkanen, who both put up 31 points, and Alex Len, who put up 24. Neither team had any extremely efficient scorers like the previous one, but they were still able to put up 329 points, making it the fourth highest scoring game in NBA history. Our next game, we have the San Antonio Spurs versus the Milwaukee Bucks, who played on March 6, 1982. This game happened just 3 months after the game in the number 1 spot, so that was a quite exciting season if you were there to watch it about 40 years ago. But we're going to talk about the number 1 game a bit later, of course. So at halftime, the Bucks led 69-65, and by the end of regulation, it was tied at 131. In the first 2 overtimes, each team scored 14 and then 12 points, sending it to a third overtime. The Spurs managed to score 14 points and held the Bucks to just 9, taking home a 5-point win. San Antonio was led by George Gervin, who scored 50, and Mike Mitchell, who dropped 45 points. Bucks' leading scorers were 2 guys that came off the bench, Brian Winters and Junior Bridgman, dropping 42 and 31. This game somehow had even better efficiency than the first one, with the Spurs shooting 58.5% from the field and the Bucks shooting 61.2%. The Spurs had 3 guys who shot over 60% and another who barely missed the mark, shooting 59.9%. Meanwhile, the Bucks had 3 guys who shot over 70% from the field. Bob Lanier on 17 shots, Quinn Buckner on 12 shots, and Brian Winters on 25 shots. This game ended 171-166, giving us a total score of 337 and giving it the honor of the 3rd highest scoring game ever. Our next game was actually extremely recently and happened only 2 seasons ago of when I'm recording this. It was the Clippers versus the Kings on February 24th, 2023. This game started off extremely fast and was tied at 40 by the end of the first quarter. By the end of the half, the Clippers led 80-76. By the end of regulation, the teams were tied at 153 points, giving us a point total of 306 going into overtime. This game only needed 2 overtimes before the Kings were able to pull out a 1-point win, beating the Clippers 176-175. This game saw some phenomenal performances, with De'Aaron Fox scoring 42 and Malik Monk scoring 45. For the Clippers, Kawhi Leonard scored 44 and Paul George scored 34. The Kings ended the game shooting 58.6%, and the Clippers ended up shooting 60.2% from the field. Fox and Monk both shot 63% from the field, while Kawhi shot 72.7%. The total score of this game ended up being 351 points, making it the 2nd highest scoring game of all time. Finally, we're at the number 1 spot. We have the Detroit Pistons versus the Denver Nuggets on December 13th, 1983. This game started out like all the previous games, fast-paced and high-scoring. At halftime, the score was 74-74, and at the end of regulation, it was 145-145. This game went into triple overtime, with the Pistons outscoring the Nuggets 186-184. This, of course, is the most and second most points ever put up by any single team in NBA history. This game saw a number of great performances. For the Pistons, Isaiah Thomas scored 47 points, John Long scored 41 points, and Kelly Tripucka scored 35 points. The Nuggets, on the other hand, had Kiki Vandeweghe drop 51 points and Alex English drop 47, while Dan Issel dropped 28. The only outstandingly efficient players in this game were Kiki Vandeweghe and John Long, with both 72% shooting efficiency on 29 and 25 shots respectively. This game saw a total of 251 shots be taken and 142 of them being made, making the game's shooting percentage 56%. Despite the crazy amount of shots that were taken, only 4 of them were 3-pointers, and only 2 of those 4 actually went in. The total score of this game ends up being 370, giving it a 19-point lead on the next highest scoring game, and of course making it the highest scoring game in NBA history. Well, that's going to wrap it up. The highest scoring games ever. This was my first video on an NBA topic, so let me know if you want more of these in the future and if you like this one. Oh, or if you just want me to continue making the NFL content I was making before. Either way, don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.